Adam Amin, our pal from ESPN, is on the call tomorrow morning. He joins us to go around the world of sports as he does most Fridays. And Adam, they call it Start Vegas, and I always say that it's because it's a start reminder and a start reality real quickly that you're not in Las Vegas when you get to East Mississippi. But great college atmosphere. Is this your first time to do a game there, or have you done one before?
I've been to Starkville, but never to Davis Wade. So I'm actually in the same boat as Chad Morris right now, the head coach at Arkansas. He said earlier this morning when we chatted with him, he's never been to Starkville. So Arkansas, during the week of practice, had to start to pump in the cowbell noise, trying to get used to what's about to go down when we're at Davis Wade Stadium tomorrow.
Yeah, you'll hear a few of them. In fact, every time I go over there for a game, my ears are ringing afterwards. I mean, it is you know how it is in this business. You cut highlights, yep. And it's hard to cut their highlights over. If you run a soundbite and you want to put some B-roll, I usually just kill the audio because the cowbells are so loud. Even when you try to pump down the audio, you can't hear what the guy's saying. So you'll enjoy it. It's a great atmosphere for college football. And it's it's a game that, as we said, Arkansas has not won a game in the conference, but boy, they've been close. First season for Chad Morris, totally different system than Bielema ran, and they've had their ups and downs. Mississippi State, meanwhile, played Alabama defensively better than anybody has all year. I mean, they're really good on defense. Offensively, some issues there. But what do you make of this game? What's your feeling on this game? Because Mississippi State struggles on offense. Could Arkansas hang around and have a shot to pull the upset?
I still feel like there are some issues offensively for Arkansas, and that's not going to be made any easier by what Mississippi State has on defense. And you talked about it, Gary. This is legit. You Alabama fans got a chance to see some real studs, some NFL guys, whether it's Abram, the safety for Mississippi State, or the two guys up front in Sweat and Simmons, who I think are both going to end up being first-round draft picks. And Sweat in particular, who's got some of the best bend off a defensive end spot I've seen over the course of this year on tape. I just think Mississippi State's too strong on the defensive end. And the other thing, too, Nick Fitzgerald, this is his senior day. It's his last game at Davis Wade Stadium. It's a big deal for him. I know it hasn't been the ideal season for him with a new head coach and a new offensive system and trying to mesh those two things. And I know a lot of people have been calling for Keaton Thompson, and obviously he'll be the quarterback or certainly in the mix for it in a year. But I feel like Nick Fitzgerald has lit up John Chavis' defense the last couple of years when he was at Texas A&M. And I just feel like Fitzgerald still brings an element of surprise to a defense that's been banged up, especially up front over the course of the season. So I still feel like Mississippi State's in good shape, but it'll be interesting to see how this one plays out tomorrow to start the day.
I'm curious about the vibe over there. I know you've probably, if you haven't talked with Joe Moorhead, you will today, and you're in Starkville, and this was a team that had high expectations based on the fact that they've got an all-star caliber defense. Nick Fitzgerald was returning for his third year as a starter. Do you get the sense, and I've talked to some Mississippi State people that almost feel like it's a wasted season from the standpoint of when you've got that type of defense and you can't capitalize with a team that challenges for a championship. They feel like we've almost wasted this great defense that we had this year to only have 6 wins at this point. 6-4. A lot of years at Mississippi State's not a bad year, but this year with all the expectations, they just aren't happy about it. What's the vibe over there surrounding this team?
Yeah, I've heard a lot of the same from some folks around the program too. That they felt like they could have won a couple more games and been in better position. And listen, they're ranked number 21 in the playoff rankings. I actually think that's a bit of a soft ranking, as good as the wins have been at times when they've beaten Texas A&M, but A&M's kind of a team that's up and down this year. That's still their best win, along with the Auburn win. But we know that Auburn's had its struggles, especially offensively at times this year too. So it's been a really up and down year. I can understand feeling like when the expectations are high and you don't meet those expectations that there is some disappointment. I understand that, but all of that being said, I still feel like this is a team in transition, and we have to remember that. Like this is still a first-year head coach, first-year system. This is still a transitional period. As much as it's disappointing to lose out on some of the experience, Fitzgerald at quarterback, you're going to lose some guys on defense, obviously, to the NFL. Yeah, that's disappointing, but this is still a first-year head coach, and I think they're going to have some better days offensively with Joe Moorhead at the controls. Yeah, it stinks when you have this type of defense. You got two generational guys. Certainly could argue they haven't had a first-round pick, I think, in like 6 years. So to have these types of defensive players and not be able to win some more games, yeah, I get it's a disappointment, but big step back for a program that only recently started to do some things under Dan Mullen. This is still supposed to be a process, and the goal is to get to an SEC title. They're in the process of doing that, and that's still got to be remembered in the midst of all of this.
Adam Amin from ESPN with us on the Bud Light Hotline. Let's talk Alabama, the number one ranked team in the country. And, of course, the big controversy here this week is whether or not Tua Tagovailoa should play in the game against the Citadel. But let's backtrack against Mississippi State. Really, for the first time this season, Alabama faced adversity on offense. They had those two opening drives, 156 yards of total offense, 2 touchdowns. And from that point on, Mississippi State's defense really gave them trouble. It was the first time all year I was at the game. You could see uncertainty in Tua Tagovailoa's eyes. You could see him not sure of himself. He made some mistakes. He didn't get the ball out of his hands. He took some hits. The offensive line struggled to protect him at times. Deontay Brown went out at left guard. Lester Cotton, the former starter, came in, and they had issues from that point on until the final drive there after State was really tired running the ball. Now, granted, success leaves clues, and Bob Shoop did a great job with his game plan, and I don't know that everybody has the material, has the players to do this to Alabama, but no doubt notes were being taken, and people around the country are saying maybe you can slow this offense down. As you're studying Mississippi State this week, what did you see from their defense? What were they able to do against Alabama that you think maybe Auburn, maybe Georgia, maybe somebody in the playoff could do as well?
Yeah, I think stuffing the middle is going to be the most important thing more than anything else. And I know Tua is not 100% either, and I understand that's still part of the issue offensively that we saw. He didn't feel like he was 100%, and I know that's been a talk of the town over the course of this week. But I really feel like when you're as stout as State is up front, that's where you have to win. And again, there aren't a lot of teams that are going to win on both sides of the ball against Alabama. And that's probably what tempers my desire to say that Alabama's flawed or vulnerable at any point, because I just, unless if they're healthy, I don't see it. But I do think that a couple of things up front, when you're as stout as you are, I think maybe Georgia, maybe a team like Auburn has, a guy like Derek Brown up front. I feel like maybe that's where you can win, but can you win for 60 minutes? And that's what Mississippi State couldn't do. Like you said, Gary, hot start last week for Alabama in the first quarter. And, yeah, I think things settled in for Mississippi State watching them on film. But, they made too many mistakes and they didn't play a perfect game. And I still think you have to do that or play close to it to win against Alabama. And I think you have to force a couple 3-and-outs early in games. I think maybe Auburn can do that in the rushing attack. I don't know if their back end can hold up against the Alabama receivers. That's what's great about having a team that has depth and this much talent. When one portion of the game plan or one position group isn't playing up to a standard, you got a lot of other position groups that maybe are not only playing up to standard, but they're playing beyond it, and they're exceeding expectations and exceeding your standards. So I feel like even when you see a flawed performance from a position group for Alabama, I still feel like there's other portions of this team that pick up the slack.
All right, I want to get your opinion on the Tua Tagovailoa story, and I hate to call it a controversy, but to some degree, that's what it's turned into this week, being here, and not just from fans. I've heard analysts, former players, all questioning Nick Saban. Now, I'll tell you up front, I agree with Nick Saban. I think it's a football game. It counts. You're playing to a standard. You're trying to get better. Tua Tagovailoa is your starting quarterback. I think it sends a message that if he's cleared to play, that he plays in the game. We don't know Jalen's status, and Mac Jones, I think, has an opportunity to be a good player. I frankly don't think they want Mac Jones to have to start the game. So Saban's going to play Tua. He's going to play all the starters that are ready to play. And some people seem to have taken exception to that. I don't get it. As Saban said, he made it clear he's coached 40-something years to get to this point. If you want to coach 40-something years and get you a team, then you can play who you want to play. I come down on the Nick Saban side of this, but quite frankly, among my media brethren, I might be in the minority. Most people are saying they would sit Tua Tagovailoa out of this game. Where do you come down on this?
I think my baseline sense tells me to sit him and rest him, but I I've never found it difficult to justify Nick Saban's action. Like, I've always felt like if he makes a decision, there's reasoning behind it, and I can justify the reasoning for it. If it's me, I probably want to sit him and rest him. But if I'm Nick Saban and I'm trying to battle a level of complacency, which I imagine is a concern this time of year when you're sitting at 10-0. I imagine when you're this good, and the old rat poison thing from a year ago, when you're talked about this highly, and everybody is raving about how good your football team is and how this season is a waste. I mean, take two huge steps back, Gary. What's the big story in college football this year? Is anybody going to beat these guys? Is anybody good enough to beat Alabama? And that's been the main story over the course of this football season. That's the overarching storyline. The number one team looks better than just about everybody outside of maybe one or two other teams. Right. So when you're Nick Saban and you're battling that and you're battling the hype surrounding that and you're trying to keep your team at a level of sharpness, starting your starters, even in a game against the Citadel, I can justify that. I can understand why Nick Saban is making the decision that he's making, because you have to battle complacency. And if you don't start those guys, you're basically telling your team, all right, you guys can relax because we're just going to roll on these guys and it doesn't even matter. And while that may not affect the Citadel game, because Alabama's going to roll them regardless, no matter who they play, maybe that affects how you play against Auburn in a rivalry game that's emotional and heated, and you want to stay sharp. I can justify the action of Nick Saban. I'm not saying I would do it, but I can certainly justify and appreciate it.
Talking college football with Adam Amin, I want to touch on one more SEC game because, and we'll get to Central Florida. I definitely want to get you, to sound off on game day being there, ABC telecast tomorrow night. But I think another game that the non-Power 5 fans are going to be watching tomorrow night's in College Station, Texas. Here's UAB, 9-1, already clinched their division in Conference USA. Just, a few years after the program was disbanded due to a lack of finances, they come back last year under Bill Clark and go 8-5. Now they've won 8 in a row. This is, they call this Cupcake Saturday in the SEC, but this is your typical cupcake. UAB rolls in there to play A&M. Of course, Jimbo Fisher almost got the UAB job a number of years back. Is Texas A&M vulnerable here against this UAB team that has a lot of confidence from Conference USA? And if UAB plays them tough, how much louder will the calls for respect for non-Power 5s be versus if A&M blows them out? What does that do to the narrative? How big a game is this for the Power 5 versus the non-Power 5s, in your opinion?
If A&M wins, it's another day at the office. If UAB plays them tight or somehow wins this game, then the chants are going to be louder than maybe ever. And that will be in concert with the game that will be played about an hour, and we'll kick off about an hour after the one in College Station. That'll be UCF in Cincinnati. I think there is a level of concern, I think, with Texas A&M right now, where at times in a 6-4 season, we've seen them have weird offensive games. And obviously, since SEC play began, they've had their struggles. They only scored 13 against this Mississippi State defense. They only scored 24 and blew the game against Auburn. I feel like I'm sure there's a little bit of concern going up against one of the better defenses in the country. So UAB's defense actually comes in playing really, really well this year. I think if A&M wins, there's not really going to be much of a blip on the radar. I think if UAB makes this close or wins this game somehow, then those cries that you're talking about are going to get louder and louder.
The game you referenced, a lot of people will be paying attention to Cincinnati and Central Florida tomorrow night, ESPN Game Day in Orlando. The game will be telecast on ABC. UCF, I think, is going to feel a different kind of pressure. First of all, they're playing a pretty good team. This is a must-win game for them. Let's be honest, because after all the hoopla, if somehow tomorrow night they lose at home to Cincinnati, boy, it will get brutal. But this is what they want. They want the national spotlight. Now they've got it. They got to go out and perform.
I'm sitting here looking at Cincinnati, and I'm just thinking to myself, Cincinnati can win this game.
Absolutely.
And this isn't a gimme for UCF. It just isn't. And this is something I know, and I feel like a lot of people who've been around the Group of Five for the last couple of years know. Cincinnati's legit. Luke Fickell has done a phenomenal job. Really strong defense. They have one loss against a good Temple team that's gotten better and better as the year's gone on. They beat, I know UCLA is not great in year one of Chip Kelly, but that's a heck of a win to have early in the season. I'm not surprised that Cincinnati's playing well, and I won't be surprised if Cincinnati wins this game. But the issue is the surrounding story with UCF, the claimed national championship, 22-game win streak. Herb Street's been a critic of UCF at times this year, and now he's going to be on campus, and he's going to go into that stadium and call a game. I've been there. I know what it's like. One of the greatest games I've called was in that stadium last Thanksgiving. And I've been around the group of five for the last few years. And I've got to be the one, along with the rest of us who cover these games, but I've often been the one going into these offices and looking Scott Frost last year in the eye, or Brian Harsin at Boise, or Jeff Tedford at Fresno State, or Mike Norvell at Memphis. And I've got to walk into the offices of these guys and look them in the eye. And can I honestly criticize these guys for coaching football? And that's the one thing that I'm excited about for Kirk and Chris Fowler and the game day crew and the primetime crew, to see these guys face to face, and then tell me that you can criticize them the way you have, because they're fighting for recognition, they're fighting for their place at the table. And do I think UCF is a top 4 team? No, I'm not dumb. Like, I've been talking a lot about how UCF deserves a chance and the playoff should expand. It's not because I think UCF should be in the playoff now. I'm saying the system is already in place to eliminate half the country from playoff contention. Because when you're in that committee room, as I've been for those mock selections, the metric that always pops up, and Gary, I know you know this, UCF's strength of schedule is not good. And that's based on how we've graded college football teams and college football programs. And in a mathematical formula relating to one another, UCF's strength of schedule doesn't deserve a top 4 spot. But you're telling me that the system in place is fair when you've already eliminated 60 teams? Because that schedule metric is always going to pop up. And even a team like Boise that scheduled difficult games in the past, it may not be enough if they lose one game to get them into the playoffs in the top 4. So that's why I feel like the process of getting a group of 5 designated spot, couple of wild cards, and then giving your Power 5 champions an automatic bid, I think that's good. I think 8 teams is valuable. I think it doesn't diminish completely the value of the regular season. We're already diminishing the value of bowl games now because we're looking at it in a playoff lens. So who cares if you make the Rose Bowl? I need you to make the playoffs. That's why everybody's yelling at Clay Helton at USC. So I know it's a rant. I know it's a tangent here, but it's something I feel strongly about because I've got to look these guys in the eye and tell them, oh, well, it's great that you're playing for this, but you're never going to win a national title in the eyes of the general public at large. So I'm glad they're getting this opportunity on Saturday night.
I am too, to be honest with you, and that's well stated. All right, we're always running short on time. I want to touch on a couple of the topics. NFL, the LeVeon Bell thing, I just don't get it. I understand he's going to make money down the road, but the shelf life of a running back can be short. This is $14.5 million he's never going to get back, and no matter what he does. And I don't get it. I mean, he's with one of the great organizations in football. He's got a terrific quarterback. This is a team that has, I think, the potential to win a Super Bowl. He said he was going to come in. He didn't come in. The Steelers have moved on nicely with James Conner, although he's in concussion protocol. What do you? I'm just trying to figure out what he and his advisors are doing here. I just don't understand LeVeon Bell here. He didn't have the leverage that he thought he had. He messed with the wrong organization, and he may not wind up in a situation as good as the Pittsburgh situation going forward. I just don't get it. Help me make some sense out of it.
Yeah, that's the thing, too. And I love Le'Veon Bell, and I think he's maybe a little bit above some of the fray when it comes to the diminishing value of running backs in the NFL, just because of what he brings as a pass catcher, what he brings to the table, and his consistency and his high level of production. So I do feel like maybe he's a little bit different compared to other running backs. He is considered to me an elite-level talent in the backfield in the NFL. But the thing that you just said, Gary, is what sticks out. He may not get a shot at another Super Bowl because, yeah, he's going to get paid. Dude is going to make his money. But is he going to be in a place like Pittsburgh that has been a consistent winner for the better part of a decade and has always had the opportunity to win? Like, yeah, you can go to New England. You're probably not going to get paid in New England because New England doesn't have to pay you. They can get somebody at a lesser value that's going to give them almost equal production, or they'll pay a bunch of guys, less money to piecemeal it together, which they've done to a high level of success in the Bill Belichick era. So where are you going to go that's going to give you as good of a shot, plus give you the money that you feel like you deserve, and you're going to have an opportunity to win a Super Bowl? I just don't know where you're going to get that chance. Steelers already packed up his locker. Some guys said it's not malicious, but it may have been therapeutic. He's already alienated the organization, the teammates, the players around that club, other than a couple of buddies that he has. I don't understand where his mind is at right now.
All right, just got a couple of minutes. NBA, this Golden State situation with Durant and Green. Normally you would say, well, this stuff happens, but the fact that the Warriors felt the need to suspend him, Green, that is, against the Hawks without pay. He comes back last night. He has no points. They get killed by the Rockets. Obviously, they want to keep Durant, and that's, I think, where their emphasis is going to be. But is this something that could splinter this team going forward? This seems to me like this is more than just a little dust-up. This almost seems like it's been brewing between these two guys.
Yeah, it's been brewing. And whatever was said in the locker room after the initial altercation on Monday night, whatever was said in the locker room was clearly important enough to force Steve Kerr's hand and the organization. That was a team suspension. That was not a league suspension. That's straight up $120K that Draymond Green has to give up. And he's a free agent after next season. If you have the choice, who do you want? And I'm taking Kevin Durant. As great as Draymond Green is, especially at Golden State, because of all of the talent around him and the defensive aspect of what he brings to the table, I want Kevin Durant. Kevin Durant might be the best scorer in the NBA, and it's hard for me to give that up. They want to keep him. I don't think this is going to damage them as much as a lot of other people think, because when they start playing games in playoff time, everything changes. Role definition is different. But I still get a sense that, this might be a fracture for a little while. I don't think it's going to be a long-term issue, just in terms of the talent that's on the floor. This isn't going to cost them a title. I don't think it's going to get to that point. I think both of these guys are heated. I think they're both professionals. And I do think it'll have an effect maybe on the free agent aspect of it. I really do. Durant can opt out. I could see him going to Washington. I could see him going to L.A. But right now, I don't think it's going to really affect much going on this season.
Finally, I want to ask you about Jacob deGrom. We can't break down all the postseason baseball awards, but and he's the best pitcher, I thought, in the National League, clearly. But he only won 10 games. I think 10 years ago, certainly 20 years ago, nobody that won 10 games was going to win the Cy Young. But now we're in the analytics era. His numbers were unbelievable. He can't help it that he was on a bad team. I'm glad he won it. But what does it say about the modern game of baseball when a starting pitcher that wins 10 games is your Cy Young Award winner for the National League?
Yeah, I mean, and this goes back to what I'm sure you're adjusting to as well, Gary. Is an old school guy, and something that I've adjusted to the last couple of years, getting away from some of the older mentalities. The win-loss record doesn't really matter. If you watch Jacob deGrom pitch and you look at his ERA and you see what he can do strikeout-wise, it's clear cut. He is the best pitcher in the National League, or pitched the best, I should say, in the National League this year. It doesn't. The Cy Young Award is supposed to award the best pitcher in the game, and to me, they did that. He had the best season by far. He was in the MVP mix for votes as well, rightfully so. So I don't think wins, losses matter as much as they used to. I think how you're pitching, especially in the modern day when guys are only going sometimes 6-7 innings, for deGrom to go 7, 8, sometimes 9 innings consistently, that speaks more to me about what type of pitcher he is and the wins that he has. I think it speaks more to the organization that he plays for that has a whole lot of problems, and I know they've got a new general manager, and maybe that'll shift things around. But more than anything else, I think it speaks about the poor quality of what the Mets are doing as an organization rather than what Jacob deGrom did or didn't do.
Adam Amin, a walking encyclopedia of sports knowledge, joins us here every week. You can follow him on Twitter at Adam Amin. Catch him tomorrow on the telecast, Mississippi State and Arkansas, Davis Wade Stadium, 11 a.m. on ESPN. Thanks so much, buddy.
Anytime, my friend.